Shalom, brothers and sisters. Good evening. Glad I can be with you all once again. Shabar Judah ben Israel on the behalf of Solid Foundation, Israelite Academy. Please subscribe, support the ministry. We need your help. We need you, brothers and sisters. We need you. All right. Today's lesson is going to be simply what is a Gentile? And I'm not going to go into full detail on what is a Gentile, but speaking of Gentile, we're gonna mostly do a cover over who are the Gentiles in the New Testament books. When you read the Bible, who are these Gentiles? Who are these Greeks? And we'll show you. So before we start it off, double honors to the elders, salutations to the Akim that's pushing his truth in season and out of season, week in and week out, edifying the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And last but not least, all praises and glorification and due honor to Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai. Yahweh being who the world knows as God, Yahweh Shai being who the world knows as Jesus the Christ. And without any further ado, let's get straight into the lesson. Who are the Gentiles in the New Testament? I've done a video on this already, so this is going to be a pretty short video. And I'm going to be bringing out more. I'm going to be reading from a lot of books to state my claim. Books that I've scanned by using the scanner. And recommend you to get these books. So let's go into book, chapter, and verse before we get the books out. Okay? Now we're going to start off in St. John 7 and take a look at verse 35. Alright? To show you that there are two types of Gentiles. St. John 7 and 35. Let's look at 34th verse and then we'll read down. But to get better understanding, let's look at 33rd verse of St. John 7. Then said Yahushua, who they call Jesus, unto them, talking about the disciples, yet a little while I am with you, and then I go unto him that sent me. 34th verse of St. John 7. Ye shall seek me, and shall not find me, and where I am, there you cannot come. So the Messiah, Yahushua, was telling his disciple that he was going to a place in a little while that they could not come. And 7:35, here's the kicker verse. Here's the main verse. It says, then said the Jews among themselves, where will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go into the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? So there you have it, Gentile twice, letting you see that there are two classifications of Gentiles. Alright, and we will go over that. So it says in St. John 7 and 35, the disciples asked the question. He said, well, before the Messiah returns to this place that we cannot go with him, they said before he returns to this place that he's talking about, we cannot go with him. Before he go, will he go to the dispersed among the Gentiles? Now, who are the dispersed among the Gentiles? They are the Israelites. We'll show you that easily. They are the dispersed among the Gentiles. I'll show you that if you don't believe me. Because we know that the Israelites were scattered out as of a nation. They were scattered out for being defiant and being disobedient to the Most High. And he scattered us North, Central, South America, different parts around the earth. He scattered us out. And let me give you this historical verse on that about the dispersed being among the Gentiles. Because the dispersed right here is talking about the Israelites that were scattered among the Gentiles. So let me give you a historical verse going back to the Torah, and we're going to look at Deuteronomy 4 and 27. And it says right here, this was said to the Israelites for disobeying the Most High commands. It says, and Yahweh, the Lord, shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen. See? So it talks about the Israelites being scattered out as a nation and left few in number among who? Among the heathen. Whither the Lord shall lead you. So where did the Lord lead us? He scattered us out. North, Central, South America, Caribbean Islands, East and Western Hemisphere. You know, different regions around the earth among the heathen. Now, who are the heathen? Let's see. The heathen are located in the red box. The Edomites, Elamites, Asherites, Adamites, Ishmaelites, Moab, Ammon, Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, Canaan, Gomer, Magog, Javan, Ashkenaz, Tarshish, Kittim. These consistently makes up the so-called white people, East Indians, the Assyrians, the Arabs, Chinese, Japanese, and Africans. Okay, so basically white people, Asian people, European people, put it like that. European people, Asian people, African people, East Indian people, and Arab people. Those are heathens that are located in the red box. Now you see Israel, which is located by the number 1. The reason why this is not highlighted in red, simply because the Israelites are not counted as the heathen. The Israelites are the chosen people of the Most High. They are not heathens. All right. So when you look in Deuteronomy 4 and 27, okay, Deuteronomy 4 and 27, and it says that the Israelites will be scattered out. Say the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, meaning among the nations we were scattered were 2 to 18. We were scattered among white people, Chinese people, Japanese people, European people. You know, we were scattered among Africans, East Indians, and Arabs. All the people in this white box that you see, number 1 was scattered among, pursuant to Deuteronomy 4 and 27. So keep that in mind, because we were scattered among the heathen. You see that? For disobedience. It said, ye shall be left few among the heathen, whether the Lord shall lead you. That means wherever region we will be sold to as slaves, we will be in the hands of the heathen. So when you go back to John 7:35, you can see the disciples, which are the Jews, saying among themselves, whether will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go to the dispersed? Now who are the dispersed? The dispersed are the scattered ones, as we saw in Deuteronomy 4 and 27, that Israel was what? Scattered among the heathen. So that's the dispersed. To disperse is scattered. Israel was scattered among the heathen. That's what Deuteronomy 4 and 27 says. But St. John 7:35 says Israel was dispersed among the Gentiles. St. John 7:35 count Israel as the dispersed among the Gentiles. Deuteronomy 4 and 27. Deuteronomy 4 and 27. Let's get that again. Count Israel as scattered among the heathen. So Deuteronomy 4 and 27 says Israel was scattered among the heathen. St. John 7:35 says they dispersed among the Gentiles. Same thing. Israel scattered among the heathen. So the Jews asked the question concerning the Messiah. They wanted to know whether the Messiah go to the dispersed among the Gentiles. Who were those? Israelites. The Israelite that was scattered among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles. So you can see Gentiles here twice. Letting you see that will he go to the dispersed among the Gentiles? The dispersed right here that's among the Gentiles are the scattered Israelite that's living among the heathen. But when it says and teach the Gentiles right here are Israelite foreigners. Number one, which made themselves Gentile state of mind by what? Following after the customs are the ones in the red box. When you're an Israelite, brothers and sisters, blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans as Israel, and when you choose to follow the ways of the heathen, you become Hellenized, or you become as counted as a heathen too. So that's why it's two different types of heathen, Gentiles there. See that? Will he go to the dispersed among the Gentiles? Will he go to the Israelites that scattered among the heathen and teach the heathen? See that? So what they was calling dispersed that was among the Gentiles. What were they calling these dispersed Israelites that was among the Gentiles here? They was calling the dispersed Gentiles too. See that? So when you see this in your Bible, such as, let's go to, you see, trying to make a long story short for you guys. Okay, I believe, typed in the wrong thing. I'm trying to find this scripture. There is no difference between the Jew or the Greek. You know, wait a minute. When you see something like this, Romans 10 and 12, for there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Those Greeks are dispersed Israelites. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. For the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. Say the same Lord is over all. Now who is it talking about over all? It's talking about concerning Israel. Because within the nation of Israel consists how many tribes? 12 tribes. So when he says in Romans 10 and 12, there's no difference between the Jew or Greek, simply it's saying that there's no difference between the Israelite who calls himself a Jew, or there's no difference between the Israelite who calls himself a Greek. Because during the time of Paul, during the time of Christ really, there were certain Israelites that was calling themselves Greeks. Yes. See, that's the history that you don't know about. But by the end of this lesson, you will be expounded. You know, you will be enlightened. So, for there's no difference between the Jew or Greek. There's no difference between the Israelite who calls himself a Jew or an Israelite who calls himself a Greek. For the same Lord over all. You know, the Messiah is over all the 12 tribes of us. That's what it means, over all. When it says all, it's not talking about all 18 table of nations, but when it says he's over all, meaning that Christ, Yahweh and the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, is over all 12 tribes. That's what it means, over all. Because many people will say over all, think that the Bible is, you know, universal. They think that the Bible is international. You know, but over all means over all 12 tribes. We have one Lord, all right? And those 12 tribes, if you do the history, certain of these tribes, you know, they ventured off. They strayed away from the covenants, and they started calling themselves Greeks. So that's basically what it's talking about, Romans 10 and 12. There's no difference between an Israelite who prefers to be a Jew, or there's no difference of an Israelite that's calling himself a Greek. For the same is Lord over all. All right? Another one, because, like I said, in 7 and 35, we seen in St. John 7 and 35, there were Israelites that was dispersed among the Gentiles. So when we go in James 1 and 1, it clearly says it. It says, James, a servant of God and the Lord, Hamashiach Yahushua, who they call Jesus Christ, says to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. So there was 12 tribes scattered abroad. This is concerning the 12 tribes which are scattered. See, the 12 tribes were scattered. The blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans were scattered as a nation of people throughout captivity and slavery. Slavery and captivity for disobeying the Most High commandments. So when it speaks about 12 tribes scattered abroad, those are the dispersed in St. John 7:35. The dispersed that was among the Gentiles. You had Israelites living among the Gentiles. Now, anytime you have Israelites living among the Gentiles, 9 times out of 10, they're going to do what? They're going to saturate the customs of the Gentiles. You know what I'm saying? They're going to basically, they're going to assimilate to the ways of the Gentiles. You put an Israelite around a Gentile nation of people long enough, they're going to come out serving their gods, come out keeping their philosophies, come out even serving their gods. So that's what happened when you put an Israelite among a heathen nation for so long. They start to adopt heathen ways, thus making themselves Gentiles. So that's why it's two Gentiles twice here, letting you know the dispersed that was among the Gentiles was Israelites once more time. I'm going to say it one more time. The dispersed among the Gentiles was number one that was among these ones in the red box. It says, and teach the Gentiles. The dispersed, once they became among the Gentiles, they learned the ways of the Gentiles, and they started calling themselves Greeks and Romans and so forth. And if you don't believe me, don't worry, I will show you this. So, for the sake of time, we don't want this video to be too long. Let's go into the documents. Let's see. I have a particular folder I want to go in. Let's go into some documents. And I want you to see this right here. I'm going to blow it up. And we're going to go into this folder that is known as Hellenism, as you can see right here. So we clicked in that folder. And this is a book right here called Judaism for Dummies on page 175. Judaism for Dummies. And we will go over this. So this is in the book Judaism for Dummies. And I will pull the book up. So if you guys want to get it, you can see how it looks. Okay, here's the book. It says Judaism for Dummies. Hope you can see that. Judaism for Dummies. And this is the book that I scanned. I put on the scanner. And I scanned page 175 to show you that the dispersed among the Gentiles were the Greeks, Israelites that call themselves Greeks. I will show you that. So let's go back at page 175 and let's zoom in a little bit and we will expound on it. It's all Greek to me. This is page 175, as you can see. Nothing lasts forever, including the Persian Empire, which was conquered by the Greeks. So, the Medo-Persian Empire, King Cyrus and Darius was conquered by the Greeks, led by Alexander the Great in 332 BCE, before the Common Era. At first, this meant little to the Jews, other than having to learn Greek. So I'm going real close so you can see. The Jews did what? Had to learn Greek. Okay, so they had to learn Greek, right? However, after Alexander's death, 9 years later, the empire was split among 4 Greek generals, which were Ptolemy, Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus, and 2 of whom are important to the Jews' history. So it was Seleucus and Ptolemy that was, out of the 4 generals, that was the most important. All right, and Seleucus took over what you call the Persian Empire, and Ptolemy took over what you call Northeast Africa, which is Egypt. All right, and wait a minute, and I don't know why I keep doing that. And the Seleucid and Ptolemy empires were in almost constant warfare over their boundaries. Unfortunately, Judea, which are the Jews, Judah, sat right in the middle of these two and was passed back and forth many times. So between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, you had Judea, which sat right in the middle of those two. And then it goes on to speak about Hellenized Jews. As you can see, I wrote this footnote here, Hellenized Jews. We'll get into Acts 6 and 1. It says, for the most of the next century, Jerusalem and the Judean kingdom were ruled by Ptolemaic Empire, and life was fairly good. It was so good that many Jews spoke only Greek. Now, I want you to see this. Many Jews spoke only Greek, especially those who lived in the Egyptian city of Alexandria, which was named after Alexander in Egypt. And Jews became increasingly Hellenized. So these Jews wasn't always Hellenized. They became Hellenized. Now, what does that mean? If you still don't understand, if you still don't comprehend what that means when the Jews became Hellenized Jews, what does this mean? That is, they assimilated into the Greek culture of philosophy, art, and sport. Now, that is, they assimilated into the Greek culture and philosophy, arts, and sport. So what did these Jews do? They assimilated. They became accustomed, all right, to what? Greek culture and philosophy, art, and sports. This happened during what time period? This happened 332 BCE when the Persian Empire fell in the hands of the Greeks, led by Alexander. And what? Israel was scattered among the heathen during that time, during the Grecian Empire. So if you have Israelites, right, which is number 1, that is scattered among the Greeks, which is number 15, Javanites, what you think they're going to end up doing eventually? They're going to end up assimilating to Greek culture, philosophy, sports, and so forth, man. And that's what Israelites did during the Grecian Empire. Now, we know the Grecian Empire was before Christ came, before the Messiah came. The Grecian Empire was established. So you need to understand what happened to the Jews before the Messiah came. That's what many people don't tell you guys. You need to understand the history on what happened to these Jews before the Messiah came. These Jews were strongly Hellenized by the Greeks' culture, philosophy, art, and sports. All right? And it also says right here, many of the Jews who yearned to become part of the new cultural opportunities. So there were many Jews, as you can see, there were many Jews who yearned to become part of the new cultural opportunities. Those cultural opportunities was Grecian cultural opportunities that these Jews died to become part of. So that's why you have the New Testament that's primarily written in Greek, because it was a lot of Israelites, it was a lot of Jews who became Hellenized, and they learned Greek because they was under the Grecians for so long. You had Israelites that had children in the Grecian Empire, and their children grew up speaking Grecian dialect and couldn't speak the Hebraic dialect, and they end up having to translate the Masoretic texts from Hebrew to Greek, which they call Septuagint, in order for these Hellenized Jews, which became Hellenized by the Greeks who spoke the Grecian dialect, to understand. You understand? So, Hellenized Jews became increasingly Hellenized. Now, Acts 6 and 1. Let's get that. So we're going into Acts 6 and 1. Now, so you can see that when it speaks 735 in St. John, there was Jews that were dispersed among the Gentiles. And then eventually end up following the ways of the Gentiles, and they did that so damn much that they started calling themselves Greeks. You had Jews calling themselves Greeks because they became accustomed to the Grecian philosophies in the culture. So, like I said, concerning the book titled Judaism for Dummies, page 175. We're going into Acts 6 and 1 to show you what Hellenism means. And it says, in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians. Keep that in mind. The Grecians against the Hebrews. So during the time of the disciples, during the acts, the days of the actions of the disciples, there broke out an uproar, which happened to be a murmuring against the Grecian and the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in daily ministration. So you had this murmuring, or you could say controversy, between Grecians and the Hebrews. Now we know the Hebrews are the Israelites, the Jews, right? And we'll click in that to show you in Acts 6 and 1. Hebrews. Now, Hebreos. That's how you would say that in Greek. Hebreos. Now that's Greek 1445 in the Greek dictionary. Now when you go into it, it says a Hebrew, you know, as always, a Hebrew. Anyone of the Jews or Israelite nation. You see that? So that's just like a man in the original Hebrew. We know that. That's an Israelite, right? But in Acts 6 and 1, it says what? In those days, right here, in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews. These Hebrews right here is just Israelites, Jews. But who are these Grecians? G1675 in the Greek dictionary. Hellenistes. 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 Now what is that in G1675 in the Grecian dictionary? You simply click in that. It says a Hellenist, and what do you know? One who imitates the manners and the customs or the worship of the Greeks and use the Greek tongue. So who are the ones that imitated the manners and customs and the worship of the Greeks and used the Greek tongue? It was the Jews, man. Just like in the book titled Judaism for Dummies at page 175, it talks about Jews became increasingly Hellenized. If you don't understand what that means, that is, they assimilated into the Greek culture of philosophy, art, and sport. So you had Jews before Christ even came on the earth. You had Jews during the time of the Grecian Empire that became accustomed to Grecian philosophy and culture. You understand? And these were known as Hellenized Jews, which we are in Acts 6 and 1. There were many Jews who yearned to become part of the new cultural opportunities of the Greeks. And when they did that and they started worshiping the Greek gods and the philosophies, the art, the sports, they assimilated to Greek culture. When they did that, they became Hellenistes, okay? Hellenistes, as you can see up here. They became Hellenistes. They became Hellenized, you know? And this was known as Jews that identified themselves as Hellenists because they imitated the manners and the customs and the worship of the Greeks. And if they didn't, and that, not only that, and they also used the Greek tongue. They were speaking Greek. And when you read the New Testament, which is NT, you're going to come across in the New Testament books, these Jews call themselves Greeks in the New Testament books. So these Jews call themselves Greeks. Why? Because these Jews were born in foreign lands and they grew up speaking Greek because they were what? They were Hellenized. They were Hellenized by the Greeks. See, Jews became increasingly Hellenized. And after they were scattered among the heathen, they assimilated to the heathen culture, philosophy, art, and sport. And the Jews eventually started calling themselves Greeks. Just like many of you so-called Negroes who are the real Jews call yourselves African Americans today or call yourself black people today. there's no difference than what they did back then. So there were many Jews who eventually end up calling themselves Greeks. All right? And that's why in Romans 10 and 12, it says this right here. There is no difference between the Jew or Greek. Because Paul was letting the people know there's no difference if you're an Israelite and you calling yourself a Jew, or if you're an Israelite and calling yourself a Greek. Because the Israelites that was calling themselves Greeks or Grecians, they thought they was totally different from the Israelites that were calling themselves Jews. But they didn't have the historical knowledge to understand that they were Israelites that grew up in Greece. And they grew up in Greece from knee high. They grew up in Greece learning the Greek philosophy, culture, and all this type of stuff. Worshiping Greek gods and playing sports. And they grew up, it was Israelites that were dispersed in Greece. And they grew up totally thinking they was Greeks. Just like a lot of our people today. Blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans. You grow up in America totally thinking you're American. No difference than back in the ancient world, what we're talking about. So there's no difference between an Israelite who prefer himself a Jew or an Israelite who calls himself an African American. There's no difference between an Israelite who prefers himself a Jew or an Israelite who prefers himself as a Hispanic. There's no difference between an Israelite who prefers himself as a Jew or prefers himself as a Native American. You understand? That's all it's saying in today's terms, if it was roughly paraphrased. There's no difference between Jew or Greek. There's no difference between an Israelite Jew, or there's no difference between an Israelite who called himself a Greek. Now, we know why they was calling themselves a Greek. In Judaism for Dummies, it tells you on page 175. Enough said. Another page I want to go over in Judaism for Dummies. Y'all need to get this book, man. This book got some gold in it, man. For real. Another page I want to go over in Judaism for Dummies, because, I mean, this book is banging, man. Let's go over this page in Judaism for Dummies. I believe this is, let me see, well, no. For the sake of time, please get this book. Please get this book and read it for yourselves. For the sake of time, I have to cut to the chase. So let's go into the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. And we're going to look at the term Grecian. Now you guys see that? It says Grecian. ZCBD stands for Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary on page 207 concerning Grecian. So let's click into that. All right. This is the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, page 207. And I scanned this as well. And for those of you that don't know how the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary looks, we're going to type it in. Zondervan, they probably already know, Compact Bible Dictionary. And this book is very cheap for now. Might want to go ahead and get it before they jack the price up on it, because this is a very good book too. Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. Get this book. And I went into the book and I scanned page 207 concerning Grecian. Now it says Greece. Some people call Greece Grecia. Now it gives two perspectives. It talks about the original national Greeks by bloodline, and then it talks about Grecians right here. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews. That's facts. Right there before your face, brothers and sisters. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folks of dispersion. So they was Jews that were dispersed in Greece. And in Greece, they grew up speaking Greek. So these Jews that were dispersed in Greece eventually started calling themselves Grecians. And that's why we was telling you in Acts 6:1, it mentions that there rose murmuring against the Hebrews. There rose murmuring against of the Grecians and the Hebrews. Now, both of these are Israelites, but you just had some Israelites that grew up in Greece, you know, and that's the history of the Grecian Empire. Now, the Bible don't give you the full rundown of the historical things that happened during the Grecian Empire. Why? Because you would have to get the apocryphal books. The apocryphal books, matter of fact, I'm going to show you guys. Just a second. The apocryphal books. 14 of these books. And out of the 14 books, you have 1st and 2nd Maccabees, which gives you a rundown on the Grecian Empire and what happened to the Jews before Christ came. When the Greeks Hellenized the Jews, you know, going down, starting from Alexander, down to his 4 generals, down to Antiochus the 4th Epiphanes, that committed terrible atrocities against the Jews and forced them under the Grecian powers, forced them to become Greeks and stop calling themselves Jews. Okay, if you don't believe me, you don't have to, but I'm going to give you irrefutable evidence whether you want to hear this or not. So let's go to 2nd Maccabees 6:6. Now, out of 2nd Maccabees 6:6, we'll go there before we get into the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, and we'll go there. 2nd Maccabees 6:6, and this is what the Grecians did to the Jews during the Grecian Empire before Christ was born. Neither was it lawful for any man to keep the Sabbath days. So the Greeks made sure the Jews didn't keep their Sabbaths any longer, or ancient feast days. Now I think that says fasts, but I believe that actually says feast, and we're looking into it right now. Neither was it lawful for any man to keep the Sabbath days or ancient feasts. So this is supposed to be feast days. I guess they made a grammatical error right there. But neither was it lawful for any Israelite Jew to keep the Sabbath. So the Jews couldn't keep the Sabbath because the Greeks made sure the Jews didn't keep the Sabbath days. The Greeks made sure the Jews didn't keep the feast days. Now those are your holy days, like the Passover, you know, Day of Pentecost, you know, Feast of Unleavened Bread, all these type of holy feasts. The Greeks made sure the Jews didn't keep anymore when they became subject to them, when they subdued them, when the Greeks subdued the Jews. Or something else the Jews couldn't do. You couldn't profess yourself at all to be a Jew. And this is 2nd Maccabees 6:6. You couldn't profess yourself at all to be a Jew. See that? Now when you go down to verse 9 in 2nd Maccabees chapter 6, in the apocryphal books, when you go down to verse 9, it says what in verse 9? And whoso would not, meaning whosoever, would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles, that is the Greeks, whatever type of Israelite that was a Jew, that did not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles, which were the Greeks did what? Put the Jews to death. So it was Israelites during the time of the Grecian Empire that did not want to see death, and they end up conforming themselves to the manners and the customs of the Gentiles, which were the Greeks, in order to save their butts. And when they conformed themselves to the manners and the customs of the Greeks told them that it was neither was it lawful for any man, any Israelite Jew to keep the Sabbath days or ancient feast days. And when you conform yourself to the manners of the Greeks, you could not profess yourself at all to be a Jew. And if you did that, it says in verse 9 out of 2nd Maccabees chapter 6 that you was literally put to death right here. So eventually, Jews end up calling themselves Grecians. And this is Acts 6:1. See that? And we already looked into what is a Grecian. A Grecian is a Hellenist. As you can see, a Grecian is nothing but a Hellenist. G1675. That ain't nothing but a Grecian. A Grecian ain't nothing but a Hellenist. A Hellenist ain't nothing but an Israelite who imitated the manners, the customs, and the worship of the Greeks, and they used the Greek tongue. So that's enough said. Back to Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. In Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, page 207, Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folks of dispersion from areas predominantly Greek. You can see Acts 6:1, we already reviewed. Now we're going to Acts 9:29 to expound more. It says, now this is talking about Apostle Paul. And this is before he became Paul. He was Saul, because he persecuted many of the Jews until the Heavenly Father, converted him into preaching the gospel. So when it says he, is talking about Saul that became Paul. He spake boldly in the name of the Lord, Hamashiach Yahushua, who the world knows as Jesus Christ, and disputed against the Grecians, but they went about to slay him. So it tells you that Saul, which became Paul, disputed among the Grecians in Acts 9:29. Now, was these national Greeks? Was these Greeks from number 15, Javanites? No, they was Israelites that took upon number 15 customs. They took upon their philosophies. They took upon their ways. So these 9:29 in Acts Grecians were not national Greeks such as Javanites. They were Israelites who took upon the national Greek customs. How do we know that? It says Grecians in Acts 9:29 that Paul disputed against, and it's the same right here, G1675, Hellenist states. And when you click into it, what do you know? It says a Hellenist. And it says one who imitates the manners and customs or the worship of the Greeks and use Greek tongue. Last but not least, B, used in the New Testament, which is where we at. It says Jews born in foreign land speaking Greek. So when you come across Grecians in your Bible, it's not talking about the national Greeks such as the Javanites. It's not talking about number 15 such as these. It's talking about Israelites that assimilated to the customs of number 15, and these Israelites eventually called themselves Grecians. All right? Enough said about that. And as you've seen in Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, as we brought that out in the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folks of dispersion from areas predominantly Greek. And we are in Acts 9:29, right? And it speaks about Grecians. So those Grecians are Jews. And Saul, who became Paul, disputed against those Jews who were calling themselves Grecians. But they were so damn Hellenized, they were so damn accustomed to the Grecian culture that they went about to slay the man when he was trying to wake them up. You see? And if you still don't believe me, you can skip above a little bit. Acts 9:29 says, after many days were fulfilled, says the Jews took counsel to kill him. Kill who? And Acts 9:22 speaks about Saul, which became Paul. You go into Acts 9:22, it says Saul, Saulios in the Greek, 45:69. Let's see who this Saul is. Saul means desired. It says the Jew's name of the Apostle Paul. So this is nothing but Apostle Paul. Now he was Saul before he became Paul. When the Most High cleaned him up, converted him into the faith, he gave him a new name, Paul, which goes back to Saul. So we're reading about Saul, which is none other than Apostle Paul. So Saul, Paul, however you want to put it, but it mentions in Acts 9, and 22. But Saul, which became Paul, increased the more in strength and confounded the Jews. So now pay close attention. You have Paul, or you can say Saul, confounding the Jews, which was where? At Damascus. Now where's Damascus located? Damascus in Greek, G1154. That is located where? Damascus, silent is the sackcloth weaver. Now that's what it means. But one of the most ancient and most important cities of Syria, lying in almost lovely and fertile plain at the eastern base of Antilivianus. So Damascus. Let's pull up a biblical geographical chart to see where Damascus is located. All right, and as you can see, Damascus is located like let's see, Damascus. Let's get a better one. You know what I'm saying? This is Egypt, Northeast Africa, Sinai Peninsula, Mount Sinai, Red Sea, the land of Canaan. That's Jerusalem. So that's Israel. And Damascus is like northern Israel, near Syria, up in this area. So, Damascus was like northern Israel. And there were Jews in Damascus, right here. Jews dwelt in Damascus. Now these same old Jews we call Grecians. Let me show you. So there's Jews who dwelt at Damascus, and you had Saul, which became Paul, preaching to them that the Messiah was, the Son of God, that he was a Mashiach, that he was the Christ. And I guess they didn't agree with it in Acts 9:23. And after many days, Saul preached to these wicked-ass Jews, right? That was really Grecians. We're going to show you that. The Jews took counsel to kill the man. But by their line of weight was known of Saul, and they watched the gates day and night to kill him. So they was trying to put Saul, Apostle Paul, to death. And it said the disciples took him by night and let him down by the wall in a basket. So the disciples saved Saul, who became Paul, from being killed. It says, and when Saul was come to Jerusalem, he essayed to join himself to the disciples, but they were all afraid of him and believed not that he was a disciple, because he did these murderous acts against the Jews. When he was Saul, he persecuted the people of God. They didn't believe that they had converted over to the faith. So Acts 9:27. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. So you have Barnabas that took Saul, which became Paul, brought him to the apostles, and declared unto them how he had seen the Lord in the way, and that he had spoken to him, and how he had preached boldly at Damascus in the name of Jesus Christ, which is Hamashiach Yahushua. So Barnabas was telling the disciples that Saul, who became Paul, he preached boldly at Damascus, which is northern Israel, in the name of Yahushua. Now, didn't I tell you up here that that Saul, when he was in Damascus preaching Yahushua, it was Jews that dwelt there, and there was what? Jews took counsel to kill the man. And we're going to discover who these Jews are, right? So you got Barnabas telling the disciples that Saul was preaching to the Jews in Damascus, right? Acts 9:28, and he was with them coming in and going out at Jerusalem. So Barnabas was there, right? And he spake boldly in the name of the Lord, Yahushua, who they call Jesus, and disputed against the Grecians, but they went about to slay him. So it tells you in Acts 9:29, the Grecians went about to slay him, but skip up a couple verses, and it tell you in 9:23 that the Jews took counsel to kill him. So the Jews that took counsel to kill him, down in Acts 9:29, says the Grecians went about to slay him. So the Jews were the Grecians. They was Jews that became heavily influenced by the Greeks, and they end up calling themselves Grecians. And if you still don't understand, and once again, Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. Let's see. In the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, page 207 speaks about Grecian was Greek-speaking Jews, folks of dispersion from areas predominantly in Greek. So Greeks were Greek-speaking Jews, folks of dispersion. So now this makes plenty of sense. Folks of dispersion. Acts 7:35. Didn't I tell you? It says, will he go to the dispersed among the Gentiles? So those were the first folks of dispersions. The Greeks. The Grecians. They was Israelites calling themselves Grecians. Why? Because they had lived among the damn Gentiles for so long that they started calling themselves Gentiles. Let's move on. I want to show you guys something else. Now, Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, we're going to look at page 223, dealing with Hellenists. So this is page 223. We're still in the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, and we're looking at 223, the term Hellenist. Okay, let me see. Can I zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it? Hellenist. Let's bring it up a little bit closer. Hellenist. Hellenists. Jews who made Greek their tongue. You see that? And with it often adopted Greek ideals and practices. We already went over these book, chapter, and verses. Acts 6:1, Acts also chapter 9, verse 29. So whenever you come across in the New Testament, they talking about some Grecians of Greeks, you know, those are Israelites, man, that made Greek their tongue, and they adopted Greek ideas and practices. When did this happen? In the year 332 BCE, led by Alexander, man. Daniel spoke about that in the 8th chapter as well. So, I don't have to keep sitting here pounding this to you guys, man. I hope you understand. So we went over that. We went over these two. Another one I want to pull out is this book called Charting the Bible. Charting the Bible. I don't want this lesson to be no longer than an hour and some change, so Charting the Bible. Charting the Bible. This is another book I own, Charting the Bible, chronologically charting the Bible. This also has some gold in it. Now, I didn't know nothing about these books. I believe the Spirit led me to buy these books. You know, nobody referred me to these books, but I came across these books. Charting the Bible, chronologically, a visual guide to God's unfolding plan. That's a long word, isn't it? But anyway, this book is called Charting the Bible. And what we're going to do, we're going to look into, you know, charting the Bible. And that's what CTB means, charting the Bible. So let's look at first Charting the Bible, page 63. And it talks about the intertestamental period. Now, the 400 years between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New are often called silent years. They claim it was a 400-year period between the Old and New Testament. Basically, between Malachi and the book of Matthew. Between Malachi and the first gospel, the New Testament starts off with the gospel of Matthew. So between the last book of the Tanakh, the last book of the Tanakh, which is the 39 books of the Old Testament, the last book makes the 39 book Malachi. They claim from Malachi to all the way to the New Testamental time of Matthew, there was a 400-year gap between, and it was called silent years. But there was no damn 400-year gap between. I'm going to tell you what happened between those 400 years from Malachi to Matthew. The Apocrypha. Malachi is the last 39 books of the Old Testament, which some may refer to the Old Testament, really the Tanakh. And after Malachi, right after Malachi, you have the Apocryphal books. If you don't believe me, you can get the King James 1611 edition, and you can look in that book. And the King James 1611 Bible has all the 80 books in it, including, it has 27. But first and foremost, it has 39 Tanakh, 39 books in the Tanakh that most people call Old Testament books. And right after the Old Testament books, or the Tanakh, it has the 14 apocryphal books. And then it has the 27 New Testamental books, and altogether 80 books. So please know that. I'm going to show you this book, this Bible really, the King James 1611 edition. It says King James Holy Bible 1611 edition. Why? Because this is the year it was printed in Britannica. It was printed in the year 1611. All right? In Britain. And later on made its way to America. And in this 1611 edition, it has the apocryphal books. But 20 years later, the Roman Catholic Protestants protested to have 14 apocryphal books moved from the Bible. And 20 years later, they gave you an authorized King James. The 14 apocryphal books that was removed from the Bible is right here. Now, if you don't have these books, you have right in your face 400 years of missing history. Because 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament is this. And if you don't have it, you have a big gap in your Bible. Okay, so some of this is incorrect. I'm going to tell you right now. This book, Charting the Bible, wait a minute. This book right here, Charting the Bible, it has bones in it. Okay, it has bones in it. It has errors in it. But you have to pray for spiritual discernment. I will show you the errors on page 63. It says, between the Old and New Testament and the beginning of the New, are often called silent years because there was no new prophetic word from God. That's a damn lie. So that's bones. During these years, the Persians were eventually replaced by the Greeks. That's correct. As Alexander the Great conquered the world and Hellenized the Middle East. That's correct. That is, Alexander did what after he Hellenized the Middle East? That is, he spread Greek culture. So, Grecian culture was not spread in the Middle East until Alexander the Greek, or the Great, conquered and Hellenized the Middle East. I want y'all to see that. And when he did that, we already know that Alexander conquered the Israelites, the Jews, and eventually they started speaking Greek. Now, that's in Charting the Bible, page 63 that we're in. Charting the Bible, page 63. Now, let's click out of that. Let's go into Charting the Bible, page 100. That talks about the intertestamental period. Charting the Bible, page 100. Charting the Bible, page 100. The intertestamental period. The Old Testament closes. The Persians are ruling over Israel. So it literally tells you the last 39 books of the Old Testament is the book of Malachi. Or if you want to call it an Old Testamental book, you can call it Tanakh. So the book of Malachi is the last 39 books of the Tanakh, or the Old Testament. And then the book of Malachi, the book of Malachi deals with the Persian Mede captivity. It deals with the Persian Empire in the book of Malachi. That the Persians were set over Israel in the book of Malachi. And they allowed the Jews to return to the promised land and to build the second temple. But when the New Testament begins, when you go into the New Testament, when the New Testament begins, the Romans are ruling the world. So in between the testaments is a period about 400 years, often referred to as the intertestamental period, which can be divided into 4 sections. So they're telling you right there, between the Persian Empire to the Roman Empire in the time of Christ, there was a 400-year gap in between. Now what is that 400-year gap? The Grecian Empire. That's the time when the Greeks ruled. But you wouldn't know that Because they took the 14 books out. They took the 14 apocryphal books out of your Bible, out of the King James 1611 edition. They took them out in the 18th century. So now, since these 14 apocryphal books is missing, you will jump straight from Malachi, which is the Persian Mede captivity, straight to the Roman captivity. You can't do that without mentioning the Greek captivity. So they tell you what happened between these 400 years. It says, after the Persians, the Greeks, from 323 to 167 BCE. And then the period of independence, when you had the Jews that revolted against the Greeks, and they revolted against the Greeks, rededicated the temple, and then down from the Grecian period, then the Roman period comes from 63 BCE to AD 325. So you cannot skip. You cannot do that. When you read the Bible, you have to know what period Gentiles ruled. Like you had the Egyptians that ruled. You had the Assyrians ruled, 721 BCE. You had the Babylonians ruled, 586 BC. You had the Persians ruled from 400 to 323 BCE. Then you had from the Persians to the Greeks that ruled from 323 to 167 BCE. But in your original authorized King James Bible, it skipped from Malachi to Matthew. And you cannot do that because you're missing the Grecian Empire. So please get these books because it talks about what happened to the Jews before Christ came. And if you know what happened to the Jews before Christ came, the Greeks Hellenized the Jews and brought them under their customs. We're giving you the biblical timeline right here. You need to write this stuff down. From the Persians to the Greeks to the period of independence when the Israelites revolted against the Greeks, and then eventually the Roman Empire came. Many of the apocryphal books were written during this time period. So I'm not making it up. The apocryphal books were written right here. While they contain errors and false teachings, that's a damn lie. Now, I told you that this book is not 100% correct. You have to pick out the bones in this book. Because they claim, while these apocryphal books talk about they was full of many errors and false teachings, but they will acknowledge that some of these books, such as 1st and 2nd Maccabees, do provide factual information about the intertestamental period. So you need the 1st and 2nd Maccabees to know what happened before Christ came. You need 1st and 2nd Maccabees to know what happened to the Jews when the Greeks subdued them and how they became Grecians, how they assimilated to Greek culture. You will find this in 1st and 2nd Maccabees in the apocryphal books that provides factual information about the intertestamental period, especially in relation to the Maccabean revolt against the Hellenistic overlords that was led by Antiochus IV Epiphanes. All right? So what really happened during the 400 years from Malachi to Matthew, which is the New Testament book? What really happened? The intertestamental period, what happened? It really wasn't no damn intertestamental period, and it wasn't no 400 years of silence. It was 400 years of dealing with the Grecian period, man. Okay? See that? I want you to see it. In 333 BC, Alexander the Great, at the age of 21, set out to destroy Persia and take over the Middle East. By 331 BC, Alexander conquered all the territory from Asia Minor to Egypt, including Judah and Jerusalem. Why? Because it lets you know that the Jews was conquered by this Grecian, by this damn Greek Alexander. It says to Persepolis and Persia, modern-day Iran. It says, in this course of this conquest, Alexander founded Greek cities and colonies such as Alexandria, Egypt, and what Alexander did during this time of 331 BC when he conquered the Jews. What did he do? It says, and spread the Greek language as the international tongue from Athens to India. So he spread Grecian culture, Grecian philosophy, Grecian activities, Grecian sport, Grecian gods, Grecian way of living, Grecian language first and foremost. He spread this all the way from Athens, which is Greece, to India, man. And you're going to tell me that Judah, the Jews, didn't pick up on this Greek language? That's why when you read in the New Testament, when it says there's no difference between Jew or Greek, those Greeks were Jews. That's why there's no difference between Jew or Greek, because there's no difference between an Israelite that professes himself to be a Jew, and there's no difference between an Israelite that professes himself to be a Greek. For they are all the same by nationality and bloodline and heritage, because they all are Israelites. It was just some Israelites, some Jews were Hellenized. During what time? 333 BC, going down to 331. See? Greek remained the primary written language on into the New Testamental era, which is why the books of the New Testament was written in Greek. Enough said there. If you don't see that, I don't understand. All right, that was page 100 in Charting the Bible. Right? Now this is page 101 in Charting the Bible. And as you can see down here, it says page 101. And it says, the Jews found themselves caught between the political struggles of the Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids in Syria. It says, initially, the Ptolemies took control of Judah and allowed the Jews to maintain their religious practice, although Greek customs became more common among the Jews. Greek customs became more common among the Jewish people, and they continued to speak Greek. And if you're a Jew that's speaking Greek, you're known as a Hellenist, or better yet, a Grecian. So when you read in the New Testament about Greeks and Grecians, those are not the original Greeks, number 15. Those are not the original Javanites as Greeks. Those are Israelites who followed the Javanite customs. So the Bible is for Israel, the whole entire Bible. But many of you don't know who those Gentiles are in the New Testament that was calling themselves Greeks. They were Israelites that strayed away from the covenants. There was Israelites that were dispersed in foreign lands, and they picked upon customs of the heathen. They took upon customs of the Romans. They took upon customs of the Greeks. You need to understand this. That's why John 7:35, we started off with this. The disciples asked Christ a question before he left. Will he go to the dispersed among the Gentiles? Those dispersed among the Gentiles were strangers, Israelite foreigners that assimilated the Gentile customs and started calling themselves Gentiles. Here, watch this. Look at this. Peter 1:1. This is what Peter stated. 1 Peter 1:1. Check this out. Peter, an apostle of Hamashiach Yahushai, who the world called Jesus Christ, to the strangers. Peter called Israelite foreigners strangers. Why? Because they were dispersed in foreign lands. Israelites were dispersed in foreign lands. He called them strangers that were scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. So you had Israelites that became strangers that were scattered out in Pontus, I believe that's Greece, Galatia, Asia Minor, Cappadocia, Greece, Asia Minor, and Bithynia, so forth. Basically, Asia, Greece, and Rome. You had Israelites that became strangers because they were scattered out, and they took upon the customs of Pontus and Galatia and Cappadocia, Asia Minor. Okay? But some of the Jews didn't remain in that dead state of mind. Some of the Jews woke up to their heritage and nationality. And that's why in 1 Corinthians, I believe, in 12, it says in 1 Corinthians 12:1, now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant. 1 Corinthians 12:2, ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away into these dumb idols, even as you were led. So, Paul tells Israelite strangers, once they have awakened and found out who they are, he say, you know that you were Gentiles. What does he mean? You were strangers to the covenant. You were Gentiles. You was lost. You was lost sheep. You were way down there in Greece calling yourself Greece. You was way down in Greece calling yourself Grecians. You was way in Rome calling yourself Romans, you know, and you was in Gentile state of mind. So now that you have woken up to this, your heritage and your nationality, to the truth, know that you were Gentiles. This wouldn't make no sense for Paul to tell national Gentiles this, which is in the red box. Because if you're a Gentile by default, you're always a Gentile. So why would Paul say, know that you were Gentiles? Because he was talking about, number one, Israel, that was dispersed among the heathen. That was dispersed among the Gentiles, that was scattered among the heathen. They assimilated to heathen customs and philosophies. But once they found out who they were and returned back to their covenants, and once they woke up to understand that they were Israelites and that they were no longer to call themselves Grecians and Romans and so forth, Paul said, know that ye were Gentiles that was carried away by these dumb idols because they was worshiping Grecian gods and Roman gods and so forth. But when they woke up to who they really were, they knew that they were Gentiles. This wouldn't make sense for Gentiles in the red box because these are national Gentiles by default. You see? And there are many other verses on this. So yeah, brothers and sisters, keep that in mind. That in page 101 in Charting the Bible, page 101 says that when the Greeks came into power, Greek customs became more common among the Jews, and they continued to speak Greek. So you had Jews eventually that started speaking Greek. You know, that's why, as you can see. And that's page 101 and Charting the Bible. And we'll bring out one more book for reference. Now this is the NAB Bible. NAB, New American Bible, page 17, talks about the origin, inspiration, and history. So, the New American Bible. They call it the Catholic Bible. I don't read from this book, but I got the book to use as educational purposes. This is the NAB Bible. As you can see, School and Church Edition, NAB Bible. And on page 17, concerning the origin of inspiration and history, as of the introduction of this book, this Bible, it speaks about the history of the Protestant canon. Now, I want to show you this because we're going to zoom in. The history of the Protestant canon on page 17. And it says the difference in the Catholic and the Protestant Bible arose in the following manner. The Jews, so they're telling you basically the difference between the Catholic and Protestant Bibles. The two different type of Catholics. You have Catholics and Protestant Catholics. The difference between the Catholic and Protestant Bibles arose in the following manner. The Jews living in few countries before Christ were divided into two groups. So it's telling you this popped off before Christ came, before he was born. All right, so these Jews living in hundreds of years before Christ came, these Jews were divided into two groups. The Jews dwelling in Palestine, which is Israel today, that spoke Hebrew, and you also had Jews in a large number that were scattered throughout the Roman Empire, and they spoke the Greek language. Now, why do they speak the Greek language? They tell you, a consequence of the conquest of Alexander the Great of Greece. This is why you had Jews scattered throughout the Roman Empire that were speaking Greek language. Why? Because it says, a consequence of the conquest of Alexander the Great of Greece. So he spread Grecian culture. He spread Grecian language. He spread Grecian philosophy. And it fell on the Jews. Okay? And you had certain Jews that was in Palestine, Israel, that spoke Hebrew. And you had a large number of Jews that were scattered throughout the Roman Empire that were speaking Greek. You see that? And this is on page 17 in the New American Bible, the church and the school and church edition. This is on page 17, I believe, right down here. I got footnotes, as you can see right there. It's John 7:35, we went over that. James 1:1, we went over that. Peter 1:1, we went over that. I have footnotes on the side to show you this. So there were certain Jews that spoke Hebrew, and there were certain Jews that were scattered throughout the Roman Empire, and they were speaking Greek. Why were they speaking Greek? Because the history tells you that when Alexander the Great came into power, in 1st and 2nd Maccabees, it tells you when Alexander the Great came into power, he spread Greek philosophy and culture. You understand? And it fell on the Jews because they were subdued by the Greeks. So when you read the Bible, please understand that when it mentions there's no difference between the Jew or Greek. Matter of fact, let's pull it up once more. Romans 10:12. When it mentions this, for there's no difference between the Jew or Greek, now you know what it's talking about. It took like 1 hour and 16 minutes just to prove my point, but now you see what it's talking about. Now doesn't it make much sense to you? Makes better sense to you? Romans 10:12, for there's no difference between the Jew or Greek. You wouldn't know this if you don't have the history dealing with the apocryphal books, especially 1st and 2nd Maccabees. You have to have that history on what the Greeks did to the Jews before Christ came. So you can see when you have that history and when you have bridged that gap, then you can go to Romans 10:12 and know that there is no difference between Jew and the Greek, for the same Lord is over all. Yeah, because Mashiach Christ is over all 12 tribes, man. You know what I'm saying? You had certain tribes that went off. You had certain tribes that were dispersed, man. And they, like I said, there you have it. You had Israelites call themselves Jews. Some Israelites call themselves Greeks. But there's no difference. They all same by nationality. They all Israelites. And Christ, Yahushua, Hamashiach, who they call Jesus Christ, he's Lord over all these 12 tribes. That's exactly why he picked 12 disciples. 12 disciples represent each tribe. You know, so Yahushua only died for 12 tribes of Israel. He didn't die for the heathens. He didn't die for the ones in the red box. You know, that's all over the Bible, man. So he's the same Lord over all is rich, and to all them that call upon him. To all that call upon him. You know what I'm saying? That's talking about Israel. If you don't believe me, this is Acts 2:22. We'll start with 21. It says, and it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now, is it talking about everybody on the table of nations? No, it's only talking about number one. It's not talking about the ones in the red box. How do we know that? Acts 2:22. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, which is Yahushua, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves also know. So it says, it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now, who is the whosoever? Whosoever of the 12 tribes of Israel. Whosoever of the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. You know, that's why I say, you blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, you are the man of Israel. You blacks, Hispanics, and Native American women, you are the woman of Israel. You are the daughters of Zion. Hear these words, because salvation is only for you. So once again, no, the entire Bible is not for all nations of people. When you read the New Testament, you come across Grecians, Greeks. That's not talking about national Gentiles by default. Let's talk about Israelite foreigners that became strangers to the covenants. You understand? Some of them woke up, some of them didn't. Like you modern day blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Some of you will wake up and start calling yourself African Americans, black people. Some of you will wake up and start accepting your heritages and calling yourself Jews again. Some of you going to continue to call yourself African Americans, niggers, and black people. Just back in the ancient world, just like you had many Israelites, you had many Jews that continued to call themselves Grecians and Romans and Ephesians and Galatians and Corinthians and so forth. So that's enough said concerning this lesson. I hope I was a help to you guys. You know, I've done this lesson before. I didn't give you a whole lot of verses, but I hope you was edified with the verses that I have to give. You know, one more, and then we will bring this to an end. This is Ephesians 2 and 11. And just remember, brothers and sisters, blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, you are the Israelites. You are the 12 tribes of Israel. You are the chosen people. The hell with the heathen. They are not the people of God. They cannot be saved. Salvation is not for the ones in the red box. The hell with the white folks. The hell with the East Indians. The hell with the Assyrians, the Arabs, Chinese, Japanese, all these damn Africans, and so forth. The hell with them. They is done. They will not be saved. They will go into slavery for the rape, robbing, and murdering that they have carried out on the 12 tribes of Israel. So last verse, Ephesians 2 and 11. Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called circumcision in the flesh made by hands. So wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles. In time past you called yourself a nigger. In time past you call yourself an African. In time past you call yourself a black person or a colored person. In time past you did that. But now we know who we are. So-called Negro African Americans. You are the Jews. You are Yehoiada. You are the Jews from the tribe of Judah. Once again, right here, you are the Jews from the tribe of Judah. You're not Negroes. In time past, you called yourself such. Remember that ye being in time past Gentile. In time past, you assimilated to the customs of America. You did follow the holidays of America. You did eat that pork, shrimp, crab, and lobster. You did break God's commandments. You was praying to a false, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, white-skinned Jesus. You was a Christian. You was submitted to Christianity, many religions and denominations. In time past, you were doing that. You made yourself a Gentile. Why? Because you was following after the manners of the Gentiles. But now, you have been awakened. Blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans. You are Israel. You are to keep his commandments. You are to keep the dietary law. Eat clean foods. You are not. You'll stop celebrating the customs of America and keep the holy feast days. You know, subscribe to Yahushua. You know, the black Messiah. You know, your heavenly Father, which is a black man as well. You understand? And support your nation of people. And wake up many people, man. Because in time past, you were Gentiles. Just like them damn Jews in the ancient world. Time past, they was calling themselves Greeks, Grecians, Romans. But now, none of that. You know, being caught up in the flesh. Who are called uncircumcision. Now, the uncircumcision were certain Jews, right, that was Hellenized by the Greeks, because it was a custom in Greece that they didn't get. It was basically the Greeks didn't circumcise their children. And when certain Jews became influenced by the Greeks, they stopped the circumcision process. So who are called uncircumcision? That was Jews that were not circumcised because they had followed after the customs of the Greeks, by which that is called circumcision. Because the uncircumcision was certain Jews that were not circumcised, but the circumcision was Jews that were circumcised that grew up under the laws of Moses and knew the laws of Moses. So in the flesh made by hands. Ephesians 2 and 12, that at the time ye were without Christ, you were without Hamashiach Yahushua, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. Now what is an alien? A stranger. Because they was Israelites, they was Jews that was dispersed in foreign lands, and they became aliens, and they started assimilating the customs of those lands. And anytime you're a Jew, you're an Israelite, you're a Jew, and you get thrown off in Greece, and you grow up in Greece, you spent your whole entire life in Greece, you're going to do what? You're going to become an alien, you're going to become a stranger. You're going to assimilate the Greek culture. So they was aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. They were strangers from the covenants of the promise, having no hope without God in the world, because they was dispersed among Gentiles. And living with Gentiles, most often, you're going to become a Gentile state of mind. So they were strangers. But now, Ephesians 2 and 13, but now, and Hamashiach Yahushua, who they call Jesus the Christ, you Ye who sometime were far off are made nigh by the blood of Christ. You the Israelites, blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. No more African Americans for you so-called blacks. No more Hispanics. No more you so-called Mexicans. You are Israelite. No more calling yourself Mexicans and Hispanics. You understand? So with that, on the behalf of Solid Foundation Israelite Academy, this has been an hour and 25 minutes and some seconds. Solid Foundation Israelite Academy. Hope you guys was edified. No, this was a long lesson. I said it wasn't gonna be long. So lucky for that, but it was very edifying. Share the knowledge, share the truth. Subscribe, and I will keep them coming. Many more videos to come. Till next time, we say shalom.